welcome. Well, this video is about dual carriageways. So what we'll do today is we'll just look at a few aspects of dual carriageways that may interest you. Hopefully will keep you safe in some of the areas to look out for. The good news is that generally speaking, dual carriageways and motorways are the safest roads you can ride or drive on. You've just got to get things right, because if it does go wrong at high speeds, naturally the consequences aren't very helpful. But generally speaking, they're good roads. So it's worth remembering that on dual carriageways and motorways, by the side of the road you have the verge. You will probably have a hard shoulder on a motorway, and it's not a running lane, although on these so-called smart motorways they've been turned into running lanes. But on a dual carriageway you have the verge, then you have the first running lane, which is known as lane 1, and then you have the second running lane, which is known as lane 2, and subsequent lanes are lane 3, lane 4, etc. So there is no such thing as a fast lane. Now there are crawler lanes which can be used on hills for large goods vehicles, but fast lanes and slow lanes don't exist because the speed limit is the same on all of them. If you are ever unfortunate enough to break down on a high-speed road, a lot of people don't realise what a frightening and intimidating place that can be. I know from experience, being stationary on a high-speed road is a very dangerous thing to have to deal with. Never turn your back on the traffic. Always move yourself well out the way and get as far away from the carriageway as you can. Even on motorways with hard shoulders, it's not safe on that hard shoulder. It's a very dangerous place to be. So we're on the motorway now. So very similar to a dual carriageway, except you have blue signs rather than green. There's different legislation for motorways. Different regulations apply. The speed limit is 70 for cars and motorcycles. One of the fundamental differences we see on motorways generally, with the exception of smart motorways, is the addition of the hard shoulder there, used for emergency use only. The other good thing about motorways is you'll never have give-way junctions on or tight junctions off of motorways. They will always be slip roads. Most of them are actually quite smooth. But don't be fooled, some of them can have quite tight bends on them, and a lot of them will come back on themselves. They will sort of curl right round where you get that at interchanges, so you can rejoin roads. So you need to use the limit point of vision and refer to your bends skills to negotiate them well. But they are naturally designed for higher speed traffic. So you can see this slip road, this sort of curls around in a very steady curve. I mean, it's fairly tight. Got to lean that bike in, making good use of the opportunities, and as I straighten up, I'm going to put that power on, use the acceleration of the bike to join the carriageway without inconveniencing anybody. You'll also see on motorways and some dual carriageway, you've got numbers by the sides of the roads. They're your locations. And the further away from London you get, the higher the number. So M2A 83.9. A is the away carriageway, coastbound carriageway, whichever is applicable. Obviously it will vary where there's no coast. Down here is a coastbound carriageway. B is the back carriageway, back to London. See M2A 84.3. So that's your location. You see the little marker posts by the side of the road. National speed limit applies end of motorway, so we've now gone from the M road to an A road. So as with all hazards, we're going to use a system to overtake, to join, to leave a dual carriageway, and we can use OSM PSL, or we can use IPSCA, the advanced system. It doesn't matter. We've covered these in previous videos. I'm not going into details about them again. But for example, we're going to leave the dual carriageway here. So I'm taking effective rear observations. I'm giving an appropriate signal. I'm considering my road position, my speed, I'm looking at my exit, and I'm just going to keep repeating that. Or alternatively, it's position, speed, gear, correct degree of acceleration, signalling as required. So one very important factor on dual carriageways, observation skills. We need to be on those mirrors very, very regularly, because vehicles can catch up with us. I mean, I'm doing the legal 70 mile/hour speed limit, other people may not. It's amazing how quickly the ground can be covered and a vehicle behind can come up on you. So I'm checking those mirrors very, very regularly, and that means that I can not have to rely on a lifesaver because my mirror memory is so good. If in doubt, it's worth just checking, of course. And we can just see a vehicle doing something strange there just on the edge of the carriageway. So I'm just going to get in front of the Skoda and then hang back a little bit in case the Heavy reacts to it. I don't know what he was doing. Heavy's still looking stable. We're all good. So I'll just gently come past the Heavy then. Now, whilst we often say dominate the middle of your lane, I will often move slightly further to the right of my lane when passing vehicles, just in case they suddenly change lane or drift. One thing you've got to be very careful about there if you're new or inexperienced is you don't get too close to the central reservation and get distracted, or particularly on a windy day get blown off course and end up in the central reservation. That's why we tend to get learners to ride in the middle of their lane, because it gives them maximum safe space. So when overtaking on a dual carriageway, really important that we check the mirrors, but also check our blind spot before signalling, and then we can move out when it's safe. Now I want to move out into lane 2 as soon as it's safe, and we need to do that smoothly. So what we don't want is to be chucking the bike around, and I very often see this with these new riders particularly. They want to change lanes immediately, so the bike literally comes out at a harsh angle. There's reasons you shouldn't do it. First of all, if you put too much power on whilst you tip the bike out at nigh on 45 degrees, you'll be powering yourself towards the central reservation, and remember, a bike under acceleration is harder to steer. If you put too much power down and the road is slippery, you have the risk that the back end may step out and have a complete loss of control. So smooth, clean, shallow lines are necessary on high-speed roads if you want to put the power down. I appreciate sometimes you've got to join a dual carriageway, you are going to have to be more angular with your turns to join. If the traffic in lane 1 is very, very dense, like on a bank holiday, a very busy day, that may be an issue. But on a free-flowing dual carriageway, you need to make sure that everything is as smooth and as gentle as possible. Now, the thing to remember when passing vehicles on a dual carriageway is we don't want to be in their blind spot any longer than we need to. So with these large goods vehicles, what I intend to do is hang back a little bit until I have a clear gap to accelerate into. And I can pass in one movement. I do not want to be loitering alongside any vehicle, but particularly a large vehicle, any longer than I need to. And one of the big safety issues with a lot of left-hand drive heavy goods vehicles is they have a lot of blind spots. I mean, so do right-hand drives, but left-hands particularly. And even though with a lot of these new mirrors they have now, you still need to make sure you do not linger in the blind spot of any vehicle. So of course, to return to lane 1, we take effective rear observations, which is often a mirror check, but we could also consider a lifesaver. We could also consider a signal, although the lifesaver and the signal are very often not necessary. So here I'm just going to move forward. Don't want to sit in his blind spot. I always want to sit in the gaps so I can see what that vehicle's doing to my left hand side. I would consider coming slightly further to the right if I needed to, in case he started to drift or change lane without checking his observations sensibly. It's just being aware of what that potential risk is to you. And then where I've got a bit more space, I'll just sit back in the middle of my lane, relax my gear a little bit more. We're just building up speed here a little bit. I'm also looking, are the cars closing on one another? Because if you look at the vehicles in lane 1, if they start closing up with the vehicle in front, they are likely to change lane in front of you, and very often they won't check their rear observations sufficiently. They may not use a signal. We've got a junction there. Someone could pull out or come up a bit sharp, cause the vehicle in lane 1 to move into lane 2, or at least swerve a little bit. He's turning, that's what's caused that slowing. But the eyes still have to be searching and looking well up the road. So if you're on a dual carriageway or a motorway and you can see a mile up the road, then take that view a mile up the road. So as we come round this right hand bend, I'm still looking all the way towards the limit point. I'm scanning, but in a moment there's going to be a very long view, and I've measured it and it's about a mile. There we go. So as we go under the bridge, we can see right to the far end where that other bridge is and where the brow of the hill is. That's about a mile's view. We can see the lay-by there, which is useful information as we're coming along, just in case someone was to pull out in front of us. But it is worth looking way up that road. For some reason it doesn't seem natural to look that far ahead. When you start driving or riding at high speeds, you must look that far ahead. You don't target fixate on that distant point, you know, you keep the eyes active, you keep them moving, you do change the length of the view that you're looking, but you need to allow that view to come all the way out to the distance and then come back in towards you, so you're scanning in a sweeping vision, getting a good look at the road ahead. So already I can see the road signs that tell us there's a slip road going to be joining just after this bend. You can see the road bend slightly to the left. So I'm checking my mirrors. I'm anticipating moving into lane 2 already. I'm able to do it if I need to do it, so I'm all prepared. Just judging the speed of those vehicles. Do I need to come out? Yep. Observation skills, planning skills, and the whole thing becomes very relaxed. It's that anticipation of what could happen that just puts you ahead of the game all the time. We can see here some green signs, so some services. We can expect a slip road off, we can expect a slip road on. He's braking. I'm already planning a move to lane 2 just in case the traffic slows and bunches in lane 1. There's several vehicles coming up in lane 2. So I'm looking down that slip road. I'm already checking it out to see if anyone's moving up that's likely to come into my path into lane 1. And there's not. So I don't need to worry. So I'm going to talk about joining a dual carriageway now. Now, one thing I often do is I pass over a bridge like this, I have a look at the carriageway. Because if there's big queues of vehicles and big problems, I'm not going to join that dual carriageway. I'm not going to commit to it. So when joining a dual carriageway, remember that it is not your right of way to join. The traffic on the main carriageway itself has right of way, and you can only join when it is safe to do so and when you have a gap. So in planning joining a dual carriageway, I'm being very aware of the traffic coming up behind and also the traffic ahead. So I have 3 points of reference: ahead, mirror, lifesaver when I join on the slip road. My gear must be good, mirror signal, looking for the gap, ahead, mirror, lifesaver, ahead, mirror, lifesaver, and then we get on with it. If you have to go racing down a slip road and then start using the brakes because you've misjudged it, you've done it wrong. And we must use nice smooth lines to join, not big angular sweeps. So just a little glance along the road there. It looks lovely and free flowing. I've got a nice picture in my mind already of what the slip road looks like, what the main carriageway looks like. Now a lot of these motorway or dual carriageway slip roads are elevated. We start from a position of height and drop down onto the carriageway. Let's use that position of advantage. I'm already looking over that armco, looking at the main carriageway, getting a feel for the density of the traffic, the speed of the traffic, what type of traffic it is. Building up a picture so that I can join smoothly and safely. And as luck would have it, it's beautiful and free flowing today. It's a very, very easy process. When you're joining, make sure you do not cause any other road user to change speed or direction. Judgment of that speed can be quite difficult. Some vehicles will be coming down at you from 80 or 90 mile an hour, and whilst we know that's not the speed limit, it doesn't mean it's not going to happen, because it is going to happen, and you have to judge that speed correctly, whether it's legal or illegal. So we'll just look at a few diagrams now to highlight some other potential incidents that may happen when joining a dual carriageway. So here you can see that the vehicle joining using lane 2 of the slip road can't join directly into lane 2 of the main carriageway, so cuts up the vehicle in lane 1 by using lane 1. And in this diagram we see a car that is in lane 2 on the main carriageway that chooses to return to lane 1 across the slip road without taking effective observations. Be very careful of this, as it can often involve your blind spot. And in this scenario here we say a vehicle in lane 2 comes into conflict with a vehicle joining lane 1 simultaneously on the slip road. And the vehicle shown in the diagram in blue, if it is a large vehicle that you cannot see easily, it increases the risk of this situation happening massively. What we'll do now then is we'll look at leaving a dual carriageway. So leaving a dual carriageway, signalling at about 300 yards or 300 metres, and we want a nice smooth line. We generally don't want to slow on the main carriageway unless we absolutely have to, which we do here because we have a bit of a tailback. So I'm watching my mirrors very carefully, and I'm planning an escape route because I do not want to be hit from behind. So when leaving the dual carriageway, mirror checks are generally enough. I don't need any lifesavers, just checking those observations all around, smoothly leaving the dual carriageway, keeping a nice central route. So I don't want to pull over to the left, I don't want to be swung out to the right, just a nice steady dominating route through your lane, so you command that part of your road. And if you haven't got any separate lanes for joining a dual carriageway, it's the same process. Just be dominant. Dominate that position and start looking early. So I'm looking up there really early. I'm not leaving it to the last minute to start my observations. Similarly, when leaving, good all-round observations again, Keeping that power on. We're not going to slow down on the main carriageway unless we absolutely have to. Once we're off the carriageway, mirror check, then we can start to lose the speed. We don't want to be losing speed on the main carriageway because it causes vehicles behind you to brake, and that causes a chain reaction. That's very often why you get lots of traffic bunched up on motorways. There's no particular reason for it. Well, the reason is that someone slowed down massively before they took the exit, and it impacts all the way back like dominoes. So when planning leaving a dual carriageway, you must take into consideration the speed of vehicles behind you and the speed and density of any vehicles in front of you and around the exit. And the best advice is to move back into lane 1 early enough that you can leave at your chosen exit. Now, in planning when to come back in, because some people will come back in too early and some people cut people up. It takes 10 seconds at 70 miles an hour to cover 300 yards. So we can use that timing to help us plan the exit. So we're going to leave the carriageway here. Notice how the traffic's bunching up quite a lot. This is where you really need to keep your awareness high. Is someone going to come up in lane 2 and at the last minute cut across in front of me? Always be prepared. And similarly, if I was going to follow the road ahead there, I need to be really aware that someone doesn't come up in lane 2 and at the last minute think, oh, I wanted that exit, and then they'll just chop straight across in front of you. And I've seen it so many times. Just go up to the next one, turn around and come back. It's much better to spend that little bit of extra time rather than risk a collision. So we're going to take this next slip road off. We can see the road sign and we can just see the junction. Now if we use the limit point analysis technique, we can see that that is sharp. So we're doing 70 miles an hour. So we're checking behind, we're going to get an early signal. We're going to get onto the slip road really early, and then we're going to get rid of all our speed. So final mirror check, onto the slip road at the earliest opportunity. Brake, 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 brake. Down to second gear, get all that speed off the brakes, head and eyes up, lean, counter steer, through the bend we go. So these short slip roads are dangerous if you don't plan, observe, and get things right. But you can see there that if we work with them in a good way, they are perfectly achievable. Now, we spoke about limit point analysis in our bends video. That limit point does not lie. So when you see that that limit point is not moving, you know that's a tight bend. And a lot of these junctions will have road signs, and that one doesn't have many, so you've got to be good. You've really got to read that road and the geographical factors well. I'm often asked about 50cc mopeds riding on dual carriageways. Well, legally they are allowed unless there is a specific prohibition in place, and of course with motorways they are prohibited. My own personal advice is I don't like the idea of a 28/30 mile an hour moped on a 70 mile an hour dual carriageway. I think you're very vulnerable. I think a lot of road users may not see you. They may not assess your speed correctly, and I think you're very vulnerable from the rear. So if you do choose to ride on them, I would suggest you only do it as a matter of complete necessity. Avoid it if you can. And if you need to commute on a CBT, on a dual carriageway, get yourself a 125, so at least you've got more chance of staying with the flow of the traffic. Okay, so that's the end of this video on dual carriageways. I hope you found it useful and you picked up some important tips. So until next time, take care and ride safe.